You know, I'm an English teacher, and for the first time, I am in a country that doesn't speak either English, a language that I master, or Portuguese, which is my mother tongue. I am in Spain right now, and the language here is Spanish. And Portuguese is very similar to Spanish, yes, but not so similar that you don't have to worry about it. I remember my first day here in Spain with my brother. We arrived last Wednesday on the 1st of May. It was a big shock to talk to people because everybody was talking so fast, and I had this sort of arrogance that I would understand Spanish no problem. You know, my Spanish is not terrible, and I could fend for myself. I could get by. I could understand people and make myself understood. But even so, it was hard. It was interesting because I had a little taste of something that I didn't have in a long time. I struggled to communicate. And so I could maybe have a little perspective from my students' sides because they are learning English, they struggle to communicate in English, and I was struggling to communicate too. I consider it was a very necessary experience for me so that I could understand my students better. So, first, I want to tell you about the problems I had and then how you can solve those problems. Because even though I had some problems, even though I am having some problems to communicate, I am a language teacher, I am an experienced language learner, and I'm able to overcome these problems. Not fast, because it's never fast, but easily. I know exactly what to do to solve those problems. So, first, my first problem was people are speaking too fast. That was the first problem. I remember when we were in immigration, the guy from the immigration from customs, he spoke normally, but the woman who was supposed to check our bags if we had anything like illegal in the bag or something, she was speaking really fast, really fast, and I couldn't quite understand her. And then she turned to me and said, escúchame, escúchame. And I was trying to say, I am, yo estoy escuchando, pero no comprendo nada, you know? So it was really, really, really hard. But I believe that was a special case because there were lots of people trying to go through customs. She was probably very, fast paced in that situation. But the people outside of the airport, this problem of speaking fast can be solved if you ask them. If you're talking to someone and they're speaking too fast, could you say that again a little slower? Or, like we say in Spanish, right? Puedes decir de nuevo, devagar, por favor? And they will speak slower for you. So that's no big deal. This works when you're talking to real people. If you're watching a show, you cannot ask them to speak slower, right? Because it's just a show. It's on TV, for example, or on YouTube. What you can do instead, however, is repeat. If you don't understand something you're watching, something you're listening to, repeat it. Go back like 10, 5, 15 seconds, listen to it again. If you're talking to real people, ask them to speak slower. That's going to help. If you're watching something that is recorded, you can just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it as many times as you need. The good listening comes from repetition. Little by little, you are going to start to notice some patterns that are happening there, and your mind is going to start to understand the words that are clumped together. But you can only do that if you have repetition. There is no other way, there is no trick, there is no shortcut. You need to repeat, 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 listen and listen and listen and listen, and little by little, you're going to get more and more. Now, something else that was a little problematic for me was using the words because Spanish for us Brazilians is easier to understand than to speak. Because when they are speaking, you can like make some sort of association to Portuguese. It's not that hard. But when you are the one who's supposed to use your words, it's hard to know if the word you're thinking of is actually Spanish or if it's just Portuguese and you think in your mind that it's Spanish because the languages are too similar, but not similar enough that they are equal. So it's a weird little spot. So what I am trying to do in this case is just trust the other person to understand me, because I don't have the vocabulary. It sucks to look up words when you're talking to somebody. Don't do that. Don't use translator. So what I do is I say what I want to say the best I can. I make gestures, I make mimics, and I trust the other person to understand. And you know what? They do. They do understand. I was going to order some ice cream at the restaurant today that I went with my brother. How the hell do you say ice cream in Spanish? I knew that in Portuguese it was sorvete, sorvete, right? But in Spanish I didn't know. But I said, okay, let's just trust the woman, she's gonna get it. And then I said, nosotros también queremos un sorvete, por favor. And then she said, sorbete. They pronounce it with a B, right? Sorbete. And I said, yeah, sí, es eso. And she said, okay, great, I'm gonna bring it to you. So they understand. They can understand. If you make some mimics, they will understand what you're saying. Trust the other person, because normally when you're trying to speak a language that the other person speaks, they normally get really, really happy about it. Like, think about us in Brazil. If we listen to a gringo trying to speak Portuguese, we get flattered, we are happy that they are trying to speak our language. It's nice. And we make an extra effort to understand them. The same happens when you're talking to foreigners. If you're trying to speak their language, they are gonna wanna understand you. So just do your best. If you don't remember the specific words, if you don't know everything, try it even so. And maybe they will understand mimics, gestures, and everything. There is a little thing that is also a little technical that's going to help you a lot. All Western languages, so I'm talking about English, Portuguese, French, Spanish, Italian, German, all of these languages, they have the same linguistic roots. They come from the same place. So there are patterns that repeat in all of these languages, all of them. So if you are able to observe and remember some of those patterns, you're going to be better able to understand and to speak. For example, in Portuguese, we have words like possível or previsível, where we have this end of the word that is evil, right? When you go to English, the version of English of this little ending is, take a look, possible, predictable. So our evil in Portuguese is bo in English, all right? So if you want to say possível, you're going to say possible. If you are able to recognize these patterns and associate it in your mind, every time you want to say a word that finishes with evil or avil, you're going to just replace it for able or able in English, and it's going to work for you. Let me give you some other examples. Check this out. Incrível is going to be incredible. The same ending. Elegível is going to be eligible. The same ending. Tangível is going to be tangible. So all languages have some sort of connection, some sort of similarity, that are patterns that repeat themselves. And if you pay attention to that, you're going to be able to do it. So, for example, it also works with letters. So in Portuguese, we have the letter J, all right? And the letter J sounds like já for us. So we can say, for example, jogo or já. But, pero en español, la letra J, the J in Spanish, sounds like ha, always. So every time you see that letter, you're going to pronounce it like ha. So you're not going to say juego, you're going to say juego, juego. And you're also not going to say rojo, rojo. You're going to say rojo, rojo. If you're able to pick up on these little things and you save them in your mind, Every time you see a new word, you're going to know how to pronounce it. Every time somebody says that sound, you're going to be able to make a picture of your mind, a picture of the word in your mind. And especially when the words are a little similar, it's possible to do. For example, there is a word that I learned for the first time today, which is the word ice in Spanish. Ice. Ice in Portuguese is gelo. Pero en español, hielo. Hielo. You know? Instead of gelo, you say hielo. It's very similar to Portuguese, but your mind needs to be ready to pick up on similarities and not equalities. You know? You're not looking for Portuguese. You're not looking for the same sounds you use. You are looking for similar sounds so that your mind can make a quick association. If you're talking to a Spanish person and you are expecting Portuguese, if you're expecting them to say, Olá, como você está? You are not going to understand them. You need to expect not something equal, but something similar. Similar. So they're going to say, Hola, como estás? Instead of Olá, como está? They're going to say bom dia instead of bom dia. It's similar, but not the same. If you keep your ears open for similar and not same, you will fare much, much better in any language you're trying to understand. Any language, including English. So like, if you are expecting exemplo, it's going to be hard. If you are expecting example, it's going to be a little easier. You know, it's not the same, but it's very, very similar. That if you are ready for something similar and not same, you're going to be able to pick up on the sound very easily. So the three things I told you in this video are, if you're struggling to listen, ask them to speak slower, or if you're watching something, repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat a lot. It's really necessary. Repetition is key to improving listening. If you're trying to speak, but you find yourself lacking vocabulary, trust the other person to understand what you're trying to say. Risk it. Risk the vocabulary. If you're using a word that you're not sure it exists on the other language, use it anyway. Maybe try to Americanize the language a little bit. So like, if instead of saying reserva in Portuguese, you try to Americanize and say reserve, they will understand because it's the same thing. Instead of saying eu posso, if you say yo puedo, it's not right because the correct one is yo puedo, pero you are Spanishalizing the word and they will understand it. Trust the other person to understand. Make gestures, make mimics. So trust the other person to understand what you're saying because they will, more often than not, get what you're trying to say and help you say it. And finally, try to look for patterns in the language. Letters that are always pronounced in a certain way. Sounds that always change in the same way. Sounds that repeat itself on the other language with maybe a couple of different letters because it's going to help you a lot. So this is the perspective of an English teacher struggling to communicate in a country that doesn't speak one of the languages I know. And let me tell you, it's working. It is freaking working. So try it as well. Try to apply these three things I mentioned here today and then tell me how you fare. Comment on this video, tell me if you agree with everything I said, and tell me if you have any tips to communicate in a language that you still don't master. Anything can help. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I see you next time.